Welcome back to the Deep Dive, everyone. This is where we take a really interesting source and really get into it, pull out the key ideas for you.
And today we've got a fantastic one. We're jumping into Chapter 4 of Dan Ariely's book, Predictably Irrational.
Ah, yes, the cost of social norms. And it really delivers on that title, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. So our goal today is pretty straightforward. Unpack these two, well, almost parallel universes. Ariely talks about social norms and market norms.
Right, how they guide us, and crucially, what the chapter says happens when they bump into each other. We're sticking just to what's in this chapter.
And it throws up some really counterintuitive stuff, like how paying someone even a small amount can sometimes make them do less work.
Or put in less effort, yeah.
Yeah.
Compared to just asking nicely and offering nothing.
Exactly. And even just thinking about money, how that changes our whole vibe, how we act towards people.
Okay, let's dig in. The chapter starts by laying out this core idea.
Yeah.
We're kind of living in two worlds at once, behaviorally speaking.
Yeah, the social norm world and the market norm world.
So let's define those based on the chapter. Social norms first.
Right. These are rooted in our need for a community, our social instincts. They're described as warm and fuzzy.
Like helping a friend move. Or bringing food to someone who's sick.
Precisely. Friendly requests, favors, mutual aid, stuff you do for others.
And the book stresses there's no immediate tit-for-tat expected.
Right.
It feels good for everyone. And maybe you get a favor back later. Maybe someone else does.
Yeah, it's not transactional in that immediate sense. The classic example the chapter uses is, well, imagine trying to pay your mother-in-law for cooking Thanksgiving dinner.
Oh, wow. Yeah, don't do that.
Exactly. The chapter's really clear offering cash there. It's just wrong. It breaks the social rule completely. Awkward, offensive, everything.
Because you just don't put a price tag on that kind of relationship or gesture.
You don't. Now, contrast that with market norms. This is the other world.
And the chapter says this one is not warm and fuzzy.
Not at all. Think sharp-edged exchanges. Wages, prices, rent, interest, costs versus benefits.
Okay, so very transactional.
Totally. You expect to get what you pay for, usually pretty promptly. It involves self-reliance, maybe inventiveness for profit, individualism. It's a different mindset.
So we juggle both. But the trouble starts, according to the chapter, when these two worlds collide, when the norms get mixed up.
Yeah, and it's fascinating how quickly things can go south when you introduce, say, market norms into a social situation.
The dating example in the chapter comes to mind.
Spot on. Taking someone out, paying for things that usually falls under the social rules of courtship, right? Building something.
But if you suddenly start, keeping a detailed spreadsheet of costs.
Or worse, imply you expect some kind of proportional return on your investment.
Oh, dear.
You've just dragged market norms kicking and screaming into a social space. And the chapter suggests that pretty much kills the social vibe of the relationship.
It mentions that Woody Allen quote, too, doesn't it? The most expensive sex is free sex.
It does. And in this context, it highlights the huge non-market cost, time, effort, emotion involved in building relationships under social norms compared to a purely transactional market exchange.
Okay, so mixing norms is tricky. How did Ariely and his colleague actually study this collision without, wrecking Thanksgivings?
Right, they needed something controlled. So the chapter describes this experiment by Heyman and Ariely using a deliberately boring computer task.
The circle dragging.
That's the one. Participants just had to drag circles into a square on the screen for 5 minutes. Effort was measured simply by how many circles they dragged.
Simple enough. And they varied the payment.
Yes, that was the key. 3 conditions. Group 1 was paid $5, clear market norm.
Okay.
Group 2 got paid just 50 cents. Still a market norm, but a really low one.
Right.
And Group 3, they were told nothing about payment. It was framed as just doing a favor for the experimenter. That's the social norm condition.
Okay, got it. So what happened? How many circles did they drag?
The results were really telling. The $5 group, they dragged about 159 circles on average. Pretty good effort.
Makes sense. Decent pay for a short task.
The 50 cents group, only about 101 circles. Significantly less.
Which also makes sense in market terms. Less pay, less work.
Exactly. Standard market logic. But here's the kicker. The group doing it as a favor, the social norm group.
The ones getting 0.
Yep. They averaged 168 circles.
Way more. More than the 50 cents group.
Way more than the 50 cents group. And actually slightly more than the $5 group.
Wow. So getting nothing motivated them more than getting 50 cents. That feels irrational.
It feels irrational if you're only wearing your market norm hat. But the chapter explains it beautifully. That tiny 50-cent payment, it instantly switched people into market mode.
So they thought, okay, 50 cents. How much effort is that worth?
Pretty much. And the answer was, not much, so they didn't try very hard. But with no money mention, they stayed in social mode. I'm helping this person out, doing a favor.
And that social motivation, that desire to help or contribute, was actually stronger than the weak market incentive.
Exactly. The small payment didn't just fail to motivate, it actively crowded out or displaced the stronger social motivation. That's the cost of introducing market norms sometimes.
Yeah, it really clarifies it. The chapter gives other examples of this displacement too, right?
Yeah.
The AARP one.
Yeah, that's a great one. AARP asked lawyers if they'd offer services to needy retirees for a very low fee, like $30 an hour.
And
Mostly they said no, but then AARP asked if they'd offer the same services for free.
they said yes, even though $30 is obviously more than $0.
Overwhelmingly yes, because $30 an hour for a lawyer who might charge hundreds is still a market norm, just a really insulting one. It makes them think in market terms, and it's not worth it.
But free.
Free triggers the social norm. I'm volunteering my skills for a good cause. And that motivation, for many of them, was much more powerful. Mentioning the money, even that low amount, just killed the goodwill.
It really is about which world your brain switches into. What about the Japanese martial arts sensei example?
Similar idea. This sensei taught for free, operating under social norms of respect, tradition, mentorship.
Okay.
When his students offered to pay him, maybe out of respect or feeling indebted, he refused. He apparently said something like, "If I charged you, you couldn't afford me," meaning putting any price on it would shift it to a market transaction. And in market terms, his time and knowledge were incredibly valuable, far more than they could likely pay. He preferred the priceless social exchange over a devalued market one.
These examples really drive home how fragile social norms can be when money enters the picture.
Yeah.
But what about gifts? Are they different from cash? The chapter looked into that too.
Yes, a crucial follow-up. Same circle dragging task. But instead of cash, some groups got gifts.
Okay.
One group got a Snickers bar worth maybe 50 cents back then. Another group got a box of Godiva chocolates worth around $5. And the control group got nothing, like before.
And how did the gift groups perform compared to the cash groups or the no payment group?
Really interesting. Both gift groups, Snickers and Godiva, worked about as hard as the group that got nothing.
So around 160-something circles.
Exactly. Snickers group, 162 circles. Godiva group, 169. No money group, 168. Basically the same high level of effort.
So a gift, even a cheap one like a Snickers,
Yeah.
didn't trigger that negative market norm response like the 50 cents cash did.
That's the takeaway from the chapter. A small gift seems to keep things in the social realm. It's a token of appreciation, not a payment. It maintains the social motivation.
Okay, but what if you mess with that? What if you tell people the price of the gift? Like, here's a 50-cent Snickers for your trouble.
They tested that, and it completely changed the outcome again.
How so?
When they explicitly told participants they'd get a 50-cent Snickers bar, their effort plummeted.
Down to the level of the 50 cents cash group.
Precisely. Same half-hearted effort, around 101 circles. Mentioning the price, even of a gift, instantly yanked it out of the social world and dropped it into the market world.
So the monetary value became the point, not the gesture itself.
That's the idea. The chapter mentions this plays out in real life too, like helping someone move a sofa. Happy to help for free, or maybe for a pizza afterwards. But if they say up front, "I'll give you a $5 pizza for helping," suddenly feels transactional and maybe not worth it.
It's amazing how just mentioning the cost changes the whole feeling. This goes beyond just payment for tasks, though. The chapter also talks about how just thinking about money changes us.
Right, the priming experiments by Vose, Mead, and Good, they use this clever scrambled sentence task.
How does that work?
Participants unscrambled sentences. Some sentences were neutral, others subtly included money-related concepts like high-paying salary or costly.
Yeah.
It just gets the idea of money floating around in their subconscious.
Okay, so they're primed to think about money without realizing it. Then what?
Then they did other unrelated tasks, and the researchers watched their behavior, and the differences were significant. Well, first, self-reliance. When given a difficult puzzle, the money-primed folks struggled on their own for much longer, like 5.5 minutes, before asking for help. Compared to the neutrally primed group, who asked for help after only about 3 minutes, thinking about money seemed to make people want to go it alone.
Interesting. Did it affect helping others?
Big time. The money-primed people were consistently less helpful, less likely to help pick up dropped pencils, less likely to help a confused fellow participant, less likely to volunteer time for data entry.
Wow. So thinking about money makes us more individualistic and less communal.
That's exactly what the chapter suggests based on these findings. Across several measures, the money-primed group acted more selfishly, preferred solitary activities, wanted more physical distance from others. They just embodied market norm characteristics more strongly.
The takeaway being that even the idea of money nudges us away from our social nature and towards the self-interested individual assumed in, like, standard economics textbooks.
It's a powerful, almost subconscious effect.
Okay, let's connect this back to everyday life and the bigger picture. The chapter gives some personal advice, right?
Yeah, like the classic. Don't mention the prices on the menu when you take someone on a date. Keep it social, not transactional.
Right. And accept your mother-in-law's gift wine graciously, even if it's cheap plonk compared to what you brought. Don't keep score in social relationships.
Exactly. It also touches on asking friends for favors. Small stuff, picking up mail, fine, that's social. But asking for huge favors, like free professional services or moving your entire apartment.
That starts to feel like exploiting the social norm, especially if it bumps up against what that time or skill would cost in the market world.
Precisely. It can strain the friendship. And then there's that really critical study about the Israeli daycare centers.
The late pickup fine. That's a famous one.
It is, and it illustrates the persistence problem. They introduced a fine for parents being late. The goal was to reduce lateness.
But it backfired, didn't it? Lateness actually went up.
It did. Before the fine, parents felt guilty if they were late. That was the social norm, keeping them mostly on time. The fine replaced the social norm, guilt, with a market norm, a price.
So they thought, okay, I can just pay to be late now. The guilt vanished.
Exactly. It became a commodity. But the really crucial part the chapter emphasizes is what happened when they got rid of the fine later.
Did the guilt come back? Did lateness go down again?
No. The market norm, once introduced, seemed to permanently kill the social norm. Lateness stayed high even after the fine was removed. The guilt didn't return.
That is sobering. Once you break that social contract with a market rule, it's really hard, maybe impossible to put it back together.
It seems that way, based on this study. And this has huge implications for businesses.
How so?
Well, companies constantly try to create social relationships with customers, right? All that we care about you, like a good neighbor.
I want that loyalty, that willingness to forgive small mistakes that comes from feeling a connection beyond just the transaction.
But the chapter warns, it's a dangerous game if you're not committed. You build up that social goodwill, then hit them with a huge unexpected fee or terrible service when they need help.
And boom, all that social capital evaporates. They snap right back into market mode, feeling betrayed.
Instantly. The advice is pretty clear. Either genuinely live up to the social relationship you're promising, consistently, or just be upfront about offering market value and stick to that. Don't try to have it both ways opportunistically.
And this applies just as much, maybe even more, to employees, right?
Absolutely. Companies try to foster social norms with employees too, moving beyond just hourly wages, offering benefits, blurring work-life lines, talking about family.
They want that extra effort, the passion, the loyalty that you don't get from a purely transactional relationship. The chapter mentions open source software as an example.
Right, where people contribute massively based on reputation, community, the joy of creation, social rewards.
But the risk here is the same. If the company cultivates that social feeling, but then acts purely based on short-term market logic.
Exactly. Things like massive layoffs, outsourcing, slashing benefits, especially healthcare. Those actions scream market norms only. They violate the implicit social contract.
If employees feel the company sees them just as costs to be managed, why should they offer loyalty or discretionary effort beyond the bare minimum required by the market contract?
It breeds cynicism. The chapter even calls corporate loyalty an oxymoron in many contexts because of this clash. It also touches on gifts versus cash bonuses for employees.
Cash is usually preferred by the employee, right? It's flexible.
Usually, yes. But the chapter suggests a well-chosen gift can sometimes be more effective at strengthening the social bond, fostering that long-term loyalty and motivation in a way cash, as a pure market signal, might not. Google's perks are mentioned as trying to build that social goodwill.
Stepping back even further, the chapter raises a really big question. Are market norms slowly taking over everything, pushing out social norms in society?
It definitely asks us to consider that. What's the impact on things like creativity, our commitment to each other, the social fabric?
It uses examples like police officers, firefighters, soldiers.
People who are motivated by social norms, duty, pride, service, to do incredibly risky things that their salaries alone couldn't possibly compensate for in a pure market sense.
Compared to, say, the customs agent example who wouldn't risk his life for government pay, unlike drug dealers risking theirs for huge profits. Market versus social motivation in high-stakes situations.
And education is another battleground mentioned. Is the focus on testing and performance-based shifting teaching from a social mission towards a market transaction?
Potentially losing something important in the process.
The suggestion is maybe we should focus more on the social goals, the mission, the pride in learning and teaching, rather than just metrics and incentives. You can't really buy a love of learning.
So after exploring all these collisions and consequences, what's the final word on money itself in the chapter?
Well, it acknowledges money is essential. Trade, specialization, all that relies on it, it's incredibly useful. But it has this power to strip away the best parts of human interaction. The social warmth, the reciprocity, the intrinsic motivation.
And it even floats that perhaps provocative idea, using Burning Man as an example.
Yeah, describing it as this temporary bubble, a gift economy based on social exchange, no money allowed. The experience is painted as, more social, caring, creative, maybe more fulfilling.
A glimpse of life with fewer market norms dominating.
Kind of, but the chapter's not saying we should all move to the desert.
Right, it's not a practical blueprint.
No. The final point is more about awareness. We need to recognize the power and value of social norms, see where market norms might be creeping in and eroding them, and maybe consciously try to nurture the social side more.
Because maybe that can bring back some civility,
Yeah.
improve our interactions, unlock those powerful social motivators.
It's about finding a better balance, perhaps.
That's a really resonant place to leave it. So we've gone deep on Chapter 4 of Predictably Irrational, pulling out the core ideas just from this chapter about social versus market norms, how they clash, and why sometimes free is better than cheap.
It definitely gives you a new lens to look at everyday life, from family dinners to workplace dynamics.
It really does. Which leads us perfectly to our final thought for you, the listener, to chew on this week. Reflecting on everything we've just discussed from this chapter, where in your own world, your work, your community, your relationships, do you see these social norms operating?
And maybe more importantly, do you see places where they seem to be under pressure, getting pushed aside by market thinking?
And if so, based on Ariely's insights here, what do you think might be the real, perhaps hidden cost of that shift?
Definitely something to ponder.
And maybe next time we'll tackle Chapter 5 from the same book. It gets into the influence of arousal.
Yes. How our emotional states can completely hijack our decision-making in ways we totally fail to predict when we're calm.
Sounds like another fascinating dive into why we act the way we do.
Looking forward to it.
We hope you'll join us then as we continue exploring these ideas together.